They thought that the bullets would silence us, but they failed. And then, out of that silence came thousands of voices. The terrorists thought they would change our aims and stop our ambitions, but nothing changed in my life except this. Weakness, fear, and hopelessness died. Strength, power, and courage was born. Good evening, friends. A very warm welcome to Womenomics Global Movement Edition 2. I'm Aparna G. Kumar, the Global Chairperson for Women Entrepreneurship and Empowerment of GCPIT. These were the words of Malala Yousafzai, the youngest Nobel Prize laureate. She was addressing the United Nations, and she continued, I'm the same, Malala. My ambitions are the same. My hopes are the same. My dreams are the same. We're going through a lot of battles in our daily lives. Now, in a world where things are not the way we want, a world which is unequal, we are getting a world where our climate, our environment is at risk. We are getting a world where people are fighting for justice and human rights. A world where women are experiencing violence at the hands of a man they know. Living in a world where women and girls do 3 times as much unpaid care and domestic work as men. The global gender pay gap is stuck at 16%. Standing in the midst of a global pandemic, United Nations says this is a historic opportunity to look at all the facts of the world and to focus on some of our greatest problems. In the 75 years since the United Nations was founded, the human race has never had to face a set of challenges like we do right now. But on the 75th anniversary of the United Nations and the 5th anniversary of the adoption of the Sustainable Development Goals, this pandemic, which is radically transforming our economies and societies, we believe that together we will be able to overcome all these problems. Nelson Mandela said, it always seems impossible until it is done. We at GCPIT believe that everyone can do their part to create a change. So we decided to take this initiative and to start a global movement to create this sustainable change in the society. We launched the Womenomics Global Movement in November 2020. And today, in this second edition, we decided to focus on the United Nations Sustainable Development 5, 8, and 10, which are gender equality, decent work, and economic growth and reduced inequalities. For those who are not familiar with our organization, let me give a brief intro. Confederation of Indian Micro, Small and Medium Enterprises, CAMSME, Global Council for Cluster Excellence in Research, GCCR, Global Council for Promotion of International Trade, GCPIT, and International Council for Technology Management and Applied Engineering, ICTME, are a group of not-for-profit organizations. Cluster Excellence in Research, or GCCR, provides industry best practices through education while enabling collaboration, mentorship, peer-based learning, and the sharing of innovative ideas for entrepreneurs across the globe. We are the fastest growing entrepreneurial support network in the country. The group aims to be the leader in providing the best industry resources for building thriving entrepreneurial ecosystems through sustainable entrepreneurial programs across a wide scope of disciplines. We are the go-to organization for micro, small, and medium enterprises, startups, womenpreneurs, studentpreneurs, solopreneurs, and other entrepreneurship support organizations who are dedicated to nurturing the unique businesses in their communities. It was during the pandemic that we grew into a powerful national business network of 16,000 plus leading entrepreneurs. Founded in the recent past by a group of young entrepreneurs, we enabled business owners to learn from each other, leading to greater business success and an enriched personal life. It is a myth that each and every one of us doesn't have the ability to change the world dramatically and quickly. There have been enormous shifts in power and behavior to the benefit of all humanity, and it can happen again. That is the reason why we all have come together today, along with Sherpa Institute, which is a global non-profit guiding communities and organizations in achieving sustainable and regenerative development goals. It's now time to listen to the experts. Let me introduce the first chief guest of the day. He serves Sherpa Institute as the research director for the UN Sustainable Development Goals Corporate Guidebook Series. He has a long history of involvement and activism in environmental and human rights causes starting in secondary school and continuing throughout life. Undergraduate degree, dual major mathematics and chemistry, and a master in business administration with high distinction in finance and strategic planning. She has had a long and successful career. She has worked for Unilever, the auto industry, and the education industry. She is a 42-year member of the American Association for the Advancement of Science, a senior member of the American Society for Quality, and has served in many nonprofit boards and as a judge for science and technology competitions for secondary schools. A partial imperative for action is SDG 13, climate action, due to the climate refugees and deaths that will result in if not addressed. This led her to connect with Ms. Andrea Hofmeyer and join Sherpa. Besides her role as research director, she is also a co-author for SDG 3 Good Health, recruits new contributors, and coaches all the SDG teams along with Ms. Hofmeyer. Let's proudly welcome our chief guest of the day, Ms. Carla Holder.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate your introduction, Aparna, and I thank GCPIT for the opportunity to speak at this conference. As you know, I am the research director at Sherpa Institute. I will introduce the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, and then share 3 personal stories on gender equity from early in my career. So, what are the SDGs? The United Nations Sustainable Development Goals were set up in 2015 with goals for mainly 2030. They've been ratified by 193 nations, comprise 17 goals and 169 targets. The SDGs are a further development of the Millennium Goals of 2000, with more goals, more targets, and more serious about implementation. The Global Compact supports the SDGs with over 8,000 business members and over 4,000 supporting organizations, which are NGOs. The SDGs and gender equality. Goal 5 is achieve gender equality and empower all women and girls. Goal 10 is reduced inequalities. Its target 2 is empower and promote the social, economic, and political inclusion of all, irrespective of sex. Women, girls, or gender are mentioned in goals 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 8, 11, 13, 16, and 17. It is easier to list those that don't. 7, energy, 9, 12, which is the circular economy, 14 is life below water, and 15 is life on land. Andrea Hofmeyer will talk in more depth about our work at Sherpa Institute on the SDGs and the Corporate Guidebook series. So I'm going to get to my 3 stories about gender equity. So why stories? Stories help us to learn from others and give concrete examples to relate to. Some may think that the struggle for equality is already won. Some may think that it is only a struggle in nations that are still developing. Some may think that people don't change, so we have to wait until they die off. Some may think that younger people are all enlightened. Some never expected it to happen to them. And some have already struggled with it just to get here today. My first story. I'm the new girl in the chem lab. Chemistry is one of my undergraduate majors. So I applied to one of the Detroit Big 3 automakers for a position as a chemist. They flew me out and invited me to an interview that included a practical exam showcasing my lab work capabilities. The chief chemist and the metallurgist over the whole lab was not there. He didn't believe in women in the lab, so they scheduled the interview during his vacation. The company was committed to improving on women's employment, and the chief chemist supervisor was supportive of my hiring. So I was hired as the second woman in the lab. What happened? I worked effectively and responsibly in various departments of the lab for 5 years and proved myself. I worked on all the equipment, whether dangerous or not. I ate lunch, chatted, and played cards with the male chemists, and got along with them. Another woman was also hired, so then there were 3 of us. I was promoted to another position outside of the laboratory to give me more career possibilities. The chief chemist was sad to see me leave. He said he was proud of his girls. He supported my promotion. So the learnings. Doing your work well proves your value. Get along with others relieves fears. Even old men can change, but old guys won't necessarily change everything, so pick your battles. If they get to know you, you can gain support and get where you are going. My second story. You're getting paid more. In between years of my MBA, I interned with a major US computer manufacturer. One of my classmates, with less work experience and a lower grade point average, was working in the same area with me under my direction. One payday, there was an issue with the paychecks, and he showed me his pay stub. I was shocked to discover that he was being paid more. I took the issue to my supervisor. I was told that he was making more because he was an engineer and had work experience. I replied that as a chemist and a programmer, I also had technical skills and more work experience. They said they'd get back to me. Then they said no. What happened? I mapped out my options and the potential implications of each. I documented everything. I contacted the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission in the state capital. I verified with the EEOC that I had a case, but I did not file one at that time to give my employer a chance to change their mind. Then I confirmed to my supervisor that I had a case, knowing that I probably wouldn't work for that firm again. I did receive the pay increase and back pay with a little prodding. After I graduated, my applications to the firm were not successful, but I wasn't surprised. I had retained my dignity, and I was paid what I was worth. So I started at Unilever instead. Learnings. Companies will change their minds with the right facts. Document everything. Think things through. Get information and research. Understand the trade-offs involved and know what you are willing to live with. And then make a decision that matches your values and priorities. My third story. Some things are necessary. The business school had few restrooms for women, so I had to go to another floor. There wasn't very much time between classes. I got a surprise, and when I checked my purse, I didn't have my supplies. I got some change out, but there were no feminine product dispensers in the restroom. Finally, a friend came in, so I asked for some help. She was quite willing to share her supplies. We were both officers in the Student Club for Women. So, what did we do? We wrote a letter of petition to the school facilities management. We explained that feminine sanitation supplies are necessary and commonly available in all schools in the US. We mentioned the fact that some of the better companies provide supplies free of charge to their women employees. We asked for dispensers to be installed in the restrooms. It turned out that the facilities manager was a woman. She met with us, agreed with us, and promised to provide every restroom, not just with a dispenser, but with free, appropriate supplies. The learnings: making change as a group is easier. One person can be dismissed. Document everything. Collaborate with other women. Point out injustice. Point out necessity. And point out when they aren't using best practices. So, as a summary, gender discrimination is alive and around the world. You will run into gender inequities. But people can change within certain limits. Companies are just made up of multiple people, so find your allies. Work hard and prove yourself. Enlist others to work on things together. Reach out to other women. Get your facts together and document you. Be persuasive. And most importantly, know what trade-offs you are willing to accept and make decisions you can live with. Thank you, Aparna, for allowing me to share my personal experiences. I am now pleased to introduce our honored guest, Ms. Andrea Hoffmeyer, co-founder of Sherpa Institute, co-author of A Six Sigma Guide to Sustainability, Continual Improvement for Social Responsibility, and editor of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals Corporate Guidebook series.
Do you see something? Do you
Yes.
see PowerPoint?
Yes, we can see now. Yes, great.
Yes, we
Oh,
can
how
see.
exciting is
Perfect.
how exciting is this? This is great. Okay.
Wow.
All right. Do you see a picture of a scraggly little girl with a calf on the screen?
Yes,
How
we are all good
exciting.
to go.
This is wonderful. Okay, great. Well, I will go fast to make up for the lost time. What you see here is a picture of a little girl with a little Charolais bull calf and a little boy. That's my little brother, and that's me back in the 1970s. So I'd like to ask you, how was your childhood? How did it go? What sort of support did you get from people around you? Teachers and your family, things like that. Every certification class at Sherpa gets to know the story of this little bull. His name is April. Why was he named April? Because he was born on April 1st. I bottle fed him when his mom didn't make it through calving, and saved him from another fate. He ended up being a prize bull. I showed him twice at the Missouri State Fair. So I was very active in all of our operations on the cattle ranches. And one of the things that I asked my father was, why did we not do some of the things that our neighboring farmers did? Why did we not use pesticides and insecticides, pesticides and herbicides, and we didn't use growth hormones with our cattle? And he took this book down from his shelf and he handed it to me. See, my dad never just gave me answers. He always gave me something to study. So what I'd like to share with you is we actually all stand on the shoulders of some really great women. We're going to talk a little bit more about Silent Spring's author, Rachel Carson. If you have not read this book, I really encourage you to do so. It's not just a book about the environment. It's a book about decisions made at the corporate level, decisions made at the community level, and Rachel Carson is really one of our true heroes. So I'd like to share that in a lot of ways, it seemed like I had an idyllic childhood. Out on the farm, out on the ranch, I was really able to express myself and learn and grow. But I have to tell you that not everything was exactly right. And the reason why is that I had this really great life out on the cattle ranch where I was in my element with the animals. But this is where I went to school. See, went to school in the city in St. Louis. And boy, that place looks like a castle, doesn't it? Well, that place was it still is, Villa de Chêne. It's a private Catholic school for girls. And you see, I did not fit in because, see, that same scraggly looking girl that you saw in the first photo is the girl who went here. I was just wearing a uniform, but all of the other awkwardness that went along with being somebody who was out in the country came along with this, and I was teased relentlessly. The other thing is that you don't always have a situation where women are helping other women, and I learned that really early on. You see, I've never really shared this publicly, but as much as my father supported me so much and gave me opportunities to learn and grow and become who I am, my mother was not so kind. My mother actually was very abusive, verbally and physically. She assured me that I didn't know what I was doing. She assured me that I was not enough in so many ways. And I swore to myself when I was a little girl that I would never be that woman. I would never be that woman as an adult. I would never be that woman as a teen. I would never be that woman who would fly into unhinged rage and be unkind. But I would also not be that woman in all the subtle ways. There's subtle ways that we can be unkind to each other. And I also found out as I became an adult that it's never too late to have a happy childhood. You're still always that girl inside, and you can create who you want to be. You can find your passion, and you can recreate yourself multiple times throughout life as you outgrow your skin. So on a particularly despondent day, I told my dad that I didn't fit in anywhere. I didn't fit in at school. I didn't even fit in out on the ranch because any of the people out in the country, I was a city girl. At school, I was a country bumpkin. As we say in the United States, I was a redneck. His reply alarmed me. I thought that he was going to put some salve on my wounds and make me feel better, but he said, "That's great." What? He said, and then he told me about a woman named Coco Chanel, who said, in order to be irreplaceable, one must always be different. I was fascinated with this. And I went to the library and I picked up a book about Coco Chanel. And you know what I found out is that Coco Chanel had a grief-stricken childhood. She was born to an unwed mother who died when Gabrielle was just a preteen, and she was sent away to a girls' orphanage run by the Sisters of the Sacred Heart of Mary. And this is where Coco learned to sew. So listen, we're going to explore a little bit about how you can be different and irreplaceable. Now, I mentioned to you that we owe a lot to some very great women. I want you to know about Gro Brundtland. She was the woman who led the Brundtland Commission, and they put out the Brundtland Report. We owe a great debt of gratitude to her. So here's a woman who was in a leadership role. In 1987, Our Common Future was published. What they published was that sustainable development seeks to meet the needs and aspirations of the present without compromising the ability to meet those in the future. Please look for heroes. We have plenty of heroes in our past. Don't think that we are trailblazing this here out on our own in the 2020s. Right before the 2020s start, we had a young woman who was a trailblazer. You all probably remember Greta last summer, the summer before last. Remember when we all used to get together in person? And she told everyone when she came to the Climate Action Summit, "You are failing us." She spoke up. This young woman has had a lot of struggles. If you've read her story, she got up there and she was brave. But the one point that I'd like to make to Greta is that this has been generations in the making. Back to Rachel Carson. In the 60 years since Rachel Carson made her appearance before the Senate subcommittee in the United States with her testimony in June of 1963, we haven't improved the situation with the environment. We've improved the situation with a lot of things as far as how we operate as a society, but we have not improved how our environment is being cared for. So we've inherited the problem that Greta is so angry about. Unfortunately, Rachel passed away shortly after she made this presentation, but she gave her all to this, and Silent Spring has sold over 2 million copies. So please look for the heroes. Whatever your field is, there are women who are heroes that you can look to and use as inspiration for your career. She said the problem must be resolved in our time. Back then, 60 years ago, it didn't happen in her time, but the problem can be resolved in our time. So let's come together. Let's build on the shoulders of these strong women, and let's do it now. As Carla explained, Sherpa Institute is a global nonprofit team, and I'm going to share with you an opportunity to get involved in our team in just a little bit. What I'd also like to share is that the founding of Sherpa Sustainability Institute really came as a result of the publication of the book that I co-authored with Dr. Holly Duckworth. She's a woman who really inspired me, and we collaborated together. And it was one of those experiences where I have to say that if you can find a woman who you can collaborate with, it'll be so valuable for you, and you might produce something great. It took a long time for us to write this book. It took us 5 years because we weren't just putting together an overview of something that already existed. We actually started a new methodology. So when women get together, and we collaborated with many other women in writing this book, too many to list right now. A couple that I'll mention: the great Ellen Dome, the godmother of trees is what I like to call her. Cheryl Adis, former master black belt at Xerox, and many, many other great women. But what we're doing now is we're addressing a corporate challenge. As Carla mentioned, there are 17 SDGs, 17 goals with 169 targets. And Henrik Sellen with Boston University said that an agenda centered on 17 SDGs runs the danger of being too general. Yes, we agree with him, and corporations are struggling with it. 169 targets can be overwhelming, but guess what? That's where you have an opportunity to be different. This is an opportunity for you to be irreplaceable, and we'll mention what that means in just a moment. The reason why we are producing the corporate guidebook series is because corporations are needed. We cannot achieve the 2030 agenda solely on the efforts from nonprofits and governmental agencies. The private sector plays a critical role. And what's the good news for you? You can find your passion. You see, there's 17 goals, each one of them with multiple underlying targets. Do you know that you could write an entire book on just one of the underlying targets? In SDG 8 that we're going to hear about today, within that lies sustainable tourism. Our co-author on sustainable tourism, his entire master's degree is in sustainable tourism. And that is his passion. So please study the SDGs. And study underneath what are the targets. There's something in there that's going to spark something in you. And then feed that by studying it. What is the past? What is the current state? And what is the future trajectory? Become very knowledgeable in that backwards and forwards. And then you will be valuable, you will be irreplaceable, because this is the 2030 agenda and businesses are looking for that. So whether you pursue that as an entrepreneur or in a corporate setting or with a government institute, if you know your stuff and an SDG and in the underlying targets, you will be irreplaceable because you will be different. With 169 of them, you can find something in there where you can be unique. And where can you also be unique? You can contribute to the production of the Sustainable Development Corporate Guidebook Series. You can join us. There are lots of opportunities in research and in writing. We are going to provide corporations with clear guidance for integrating the UN SDGs into their strategies and operations. Because corporations that implement solutions to the challenges identified in the UN 2030 agenda will generate new opportunities, gain a competitive advantage, and contribute to a world that we all want. So you can join us. If you're curious about how to find out about it, go to the Sherpa Institute page on LinkedIn. We will be posting continually what are the opportunities and how do you get involved. Here's the series schedule. You'll be hearing today from some of our folks on SDG 8. We are in production right now for SDGs 3, 4, 8, and 12. You can see those up on the screen, what they're about. We're going to be onboarding the subsequent groups. There are 4 groups of 4. That's 16. There will be 17 is produced a little bit differently than these groups. So this is the year to get involved. Now is the time to get involved. There are so many different opportunities. So parting thoughts. It really is never too late to have a happy childhood because you are still always that little girl inside. So be good to yourself. Be kind to yourself. If you weren't supported as a little girl, you can support that little girl that's still inside you. You can create you. Find what is your passion and pursue it. Really understand it backwards and forwards. Recreate yourself if you ever outgrow your own skin. I myself went back to school, both for my undergrad and my graduate degrees. I was not the typical age. Become an expert in whatever you choose to be your passion. And support other women. Don't be that woman who undercuts other women. Don't be that woman who has unbridled competition with other women. And why should you support other women? I have to thank some of my team members for reminding me about this next one. There is a special place in hell for women who don't help other women, as Madeleine Albright told us, who was the first female Secretary of State for the United States. So those are my comments for you. I admire every woman who is on the panel. I admire Aparna. I admire Carla, and I admire every woman who has tuned in. And guess what? I also admire every man who has tuned in because he's joined us in this effort of Womenomics. So thank you very much.
In the first panel, we are focusing on gender equality and reduced inequalities. According to the United Nations, gender equality is not only a fundamental human right, but a necessary foundation for a peaceful, prosperous, and sustainable world. And to reduce inequalities, policies should be universal in principle, paying attention to the needs of disadvantaged and marginalized populations. Let me invite Ms. Carla Holder to introduce the panelists and moderate the session.
Thank you very much, Aparna. And let me get my slide up here so I can introduce everyone. I am pleased to introduce to you today's panelists on SDGs 5 and gender equality and 10 reduced inequalities. More in-depth biographies are available on the GCPIT website. Ginger Rocky Johnson is a scissor expert with Sherpa Institute, Six Sigma Black Belt, advocate for teens in foster care, court-appointed guardian for children in legal cases, and heads a home for teens where youth are provided mentoring, life skills, support, clothes, and housing so they can get ready for adulthood. Pavitra Rao is a Sherpa colleague, researcher on companies, and on SDG 12, Sustainable Consumption and Production. She has experience facilitating corporate responsibility projects and sustainability solutions in companies, nonprofits, and public agencies. Abir Sassi is founder of Abir Sustainable Advisory in Tunisia, a sustainable development advisor, a quality assessor, quality auditor, and has managed operational processes for quality and sustainable development. She holds a national diploma with honors in engineering. Christina Scott is founder of Digiloop Ltd and Beyonder Ltd, which she uses to further her passion. Christina has worked in third, private, and public sectors. She has developed a quadruple bottom line business model to support inclusion, gender equality, and climate action. An ambassador for Women's Enterprise Scotland, she is also a supporter of the charity Smart Stems. Ipshita Sen is founder of Engendered, a nonprofit which enhances women's economic empowerment by supporting both entrepreneurs and the corporate sector. She is the founding president of the India chapter of Global Women in PR. This is a second phase after a long career in corporate PR, communications, and media. Is everyone in place? Our first topic for the panel today is: what should equality in the workplace look like, and what needs to change? Audience, please put your questions in chat so we can address your questions after the panelists have spoken. 2 minutes per panelist, please. Ginger?
Hi. Workplaces are a collaboration of men and women. From a youth's perspective, equality in the workplace should be blind to age, gender, familial backgrounds, and socioeconomic status. Workplaces would seek out to youth to raise them up to be inspirational leaders and bring them to their fullest potential. Workplaces need to change their mindset as it relates to youth. People in the workplace need to change their policies to afford opportunities to youth. Equality in the workplace would be blind to the inexperience of youth and accept that youth inexperience and the elders' background and experience make a richness and a vastness that inspire inspiration. Workplaces should help equal the playing field for youth by seeking out and helping those from foster care and those who are homeless. They didn't get there by choice. They need mentors. Workplaces are a brilliant way of helping youth be mentored in a more positive light, in light of familial backgrounds that weren't the ones that they chose to have. We all have the family backgrounds we didn't want to have at some point in our life. Workplace should include foster and homeless youth for their resilience, their no-hold-barred view of life, their outspokenness. The cultural inequities and gender differences are what make workplaces a special ground for passing on the human spirit and inspiring new inspiration and innovations that help move us forward in life. Thank you.
Thank you, Ginger. Pavitra?
Thank you, Carla. As Ginger put it, equality to me starts with diversity and inclusion. And this starts with hiring without bias, not just toward ethnicities, gender, disabilities, sexual orientation, and age, but also to include people with differences in education, personalities, skill sets, experiences, and knowledge bases. Meaning, candidates who are willing and have the potential to do the job and who might not have had the access to best of the universities in the world should be given equal consideration as a candidate with the prestigious pedigree. After all, universities are expensive, and more so the top ones. Not everyone can afford it, particularly a large majority of women. Even today, in many cultures, a huge chunk of money, which can be invested in girls' education, is often instead reserved for the wedding. Another important point here is that companies can fare better with investment in training and mentorship programs as opposed to investing in finding culturally fit candidates. This lack of fit perception disproportionately affects women at all levels in all industries. Don't you often hear this? Women are stereotyped as nice but incompetent, friendly, hence unsuitable to lead. Finally, any discussion about equality is incomplete without addressing pay parity. Again, this stems from the prevalent attitudes in hiring. Let me bring the focus here to India. According to World Bank report, 6 in every 10 jobs in India prefer male candidates, and jobs requiring more experience also prefer men to women. How many of us have experienced this before? Even though you had better credentials, the position was given to a man, as Carla mentioned. To conclude, in the interest of time, the key for the companies is in making a conscious and deliberate effort to bring about cultural transformation that can percolate from the workplace to the external society and vice versa. Thank you.
Thank you, Pavitra. Abir?
Thank you for the question. So, first of all, for me, the equality in workplace means equal job opportunities for employees and for job applicants. So we shouldn't just treat people unfairly because of reasons protected by discrimination laws, such as sex or race or age. So everyone received fair treatment, and there is transparency to cause and effect. So for me, jobs should be filled based on merit and regardless of gender. That doesn't mean we should or we must give opportunities to women just because they're women, or for young employees just because they're young, or to give them opportunity, but we should do it by merit. And I can mention an example of too many companies which are increasing the number of female employees, but they don't pay equal. Okay, they say we have a huge number of female employees, but they don't pay them equal like men employees. So equality doesn't mean we have to provide work for women, but focus on the merit, and that's what we need to change. That means women should believe on themselves and aspire to reach leadership positions. So I think that we need to change. What we need to change in the workplace is the workplace itself. We need to stop telling women to adapt the male domination workplace, but leaders need to start by believing on equality in workplace and adopt the right mindset, focus on understanding and awareness, and creating a favorable environment and atmosphere for equality in workplace.
Thank you, Abir. Christina?
Hi, everyone. Thanks. Just to really follow on from where Ginger, Pavitha and Abir has come from, absolutely everything there. And what does equality in the workplace look to us like at Beyonder? It looks beautiful, and we know that because that's what we have built. I have worked in the public sector, private sector, and the third sector, and equality is something that's very close to our heart. We have spent the past 8 years working primarily in education and then in manufacturing, creating that culture and that empowerment opportunity for women to lead there. Our whole team is built around people with caring responsibilities, health challenges, a myriad of barriers that might not be supported in the usual 9 to 5 job. We wanted to prove that actually everyone has value and everyone has skills. We just have to invest that bit more and dig that bit deeper to give everyone that opportunity. And it's not easy. It's not easy to do, but we have and we've achieved it. And our team are about to go employee owned. And that's why I think the SDGs and where we really have to tackle equality is where business can really lead on this. I think our public sector is quite often stymied by out-of-date policies and frameworks that haven't quite been written for that level of inclusion as yet. And I think it's really up to the business world to help lead on that. And so we can make sure that that's fed right back down through to education, especially from an early years level, and build those pathways in between. It's not a case of either or, it's got to be a case of and. Thank you.
Thank you, Christina. Ipshita?
I just want to maybe wrap up this topic because all the panelists have made such important points. Most important probably being that the first thing that we need is inclusion. Diversity, yes, but diversity doesn't work unless there's inclusion. And what are some of the ways in the corporate world? So the first thing is the recruitment process. Look further. Look at the qualifications that you're asking for. Our panelists made this point that it may not, we need to move on from the old-fashioned way of hiring. So that's the first thing. Let's make jobs available to a more diverse set of people. Let's also look at performance evaluation criteria. And again, there is a lot of work that is going on in this place, of course, but it's still very much from the lens of the older way of doing things. And so what is success at the workplace? Maybe we need to redefine that and look at performance evaluation from a crowdsourced perspective, because, you know, when women take on jobs that were typically held by men, women have further greater scrutiny, right? They are, you're almost expecting them to fail at that job. And then finally, the last thing that I would say is retention. So you've hired the person, you've put them through the performance evaluation process, etc. Then you need to figure out how to make them stay on with you. So coming back to inclusion. And I think that's the most important thing that needs to change.
Thank you, Ipshita. We do have one question it's actually not from the audience, it is from Andrea Hoffmeyer herself. The issue of funds for girls and women being budgeted for weddings instead of education is an eye-opener. Do the panelists see an opportunity to change professional opportunities for women by starting with attitudes within families and society overall? And I think we can take 5 minutes for that discussion. And I'm going to mute and let the panelists talk.
Well, thank you for the question, Andrea. I was about to reply to the answer on the chat, but yeah, thank you for bringing it up here, Carla. Well, yeah, as you put it, trying to solve this issue from the view of starting with the families, it's a very convoluted nature of trying to, address this issue, because just take the example of India. Although dowry is illegal in India, it's still very much in practice. So the girls' families are supposed to pay a huge chunk of dowries in many communities to ensure that the girls are married to a very suitable, well-placed, respectable man. So this takes out a huge chunk of money from education and anything else that goes into the investment. And this doubly so if the family is from lower income background. So yes, as you said, the cultural transformation, to bring about cultural transformation at every level, starting with families, societies, individuals, men and women, even sensitizing women and encouraging them and making them self-sufficient and to be confident enough to say that, no, I do not want to marry a person who would want to marry me just for the dowry. So all these things at every stage, it is going to matter a lot. And we are definitely making progress towards it, but it still persists, sadly. And that's the truth. And unless, if not for a collaborative approach towards this problem, it's only going to take a long time to solve all these issues.
And I agree. I believe it's cultural. In Tampa, Florida, there is a very large Hispanic and as well as Asian societal norms, and not just with the marriage, but also with quinceañera. And here you're teaching these young women the value that's in their culture, that this is more important than seeking, education. So I think that we have to start with the families themselves and breeding in them and helping them understand that education and educating women is just as important as their cultural beliefs of quinceañeras and weddings. And if you're going to spend $10,000 on a quinceañera, you need to also balance that out with showing the youth that $10,000 also needs to have for your education.
Yes, I agree with you. I'm living in Tunisia. I'm Tunisian. I want to focus on this point because on countries under development, most of people think that marriage is much more important than education and working. So the first target for any girl or any woman is to marry, and then if she can follow education, is okay, unless it's not really dangerous for her. So we need to focus on education, and we need to start by changing the mindset of families, of the society. It's a social education, and the most women continue to follow their studies and educations and follow trainings, etc. They want to finish their studies, but sometimes they're facing some barrage caused by families, and they oblige them to marry. It's changing now. It's starting to change, but we still have some families and we still have some regions thinking with this kind of mindset. So the social education, not only the school education, is much more important to push and to push us all to change and to make to be a change maker in the society.
Yeah, just to follow on from that, I absolutely agree with everything that's been said. And what we really need to do is actually have more role models who have achieved that, particularly from that culture and background, to really help drive that forward. I recall when I used to run national training programme, time mediating for a young woman because her father did not want her to attend the programme because he felt that her role was in the home. And you really have to challenge that and get under the hood of the belief and the perception and how it is really about, the love of his daughter and being able to support her to be able to lead that life that she wants while still understanding and supporting their own culture. And, it takes a lot of open dialogue, it takes patience, and I think we all have to do that together. And I think the more that we speak openly about these things, the more chance we have of creating that inclusion.
Shita?
Well, nothing in particular to add. I think the panelists have spoken very eloquently about this. But the one thing that the carryover from this sort of a mindset, and I can just quickly take a moment to tell you about someone way back in my team, a very bright young girl, newly married, doing very well at work, decided that she wanted to leave. And the reason why she wanted to leave was she felt that making a cooked breakfast for her husband every morning was more important to her, and that morning time was more important to her than her career and her job, and she quit. So the conditioning, the social conditioning, we still carry with us into the workplace. So of course this is a very, very important conversation that needs to happen right from when you're in school.
Thank you, panelists, for your insights. Now to our second topic of the panel, What does Women in the C-Suite and Boardroom do for women's equality? 2 minutes, please. And Ipshita, could you start, please?
Sure, I will. And to start with, I want to quote Melinda Gates when she said, "We are sending our daughters into a workplace that was designed for our fathers." And who's going to make those changes? It is up to a more diverse, a more gender balanced board, the boardroom. And taking a leaf out of what's happening in India, and just to bring to the table this point that it's not just about having more women on the board and what they can do about it. In India, it is mandatory to have a woman on the board. That is a government mandate. So what happens? Usually, it is the wife of the chairman, it is the sister, it is a family member, and so it's just a checkbox exercise. And then, they are not bringing to the table anything at all. So the first thing is about getting the right kind of women, the right kind of representation onto the board. And then once you do that, then it drives a very different kind of messaging right through the organization with your stakeholders, everybody. What happens? It portrays you as having a sort of a more bolder leadership, right? By challenging what could be the norm of that industry, of taking a stance which maybe your competitors have not done as yet. Also, we know that gender diverse or just diversity in teams leads to better innovation. So we are looking at more creativity, we are looking at more innovation, and generally maybe more customer connect, because when you know what your customers want, you're going to bring much better products into the market. So I think the whole point is that you will end up creating a more empowering environment. Thank you.
Thank you, Ipshita. Christina?
Okay, lovely. Thank you. Just to follow on pretty much from what Andrea was saying earlier, it really depends on the women. If we are fortunate to have those brilliant women in the C-suite who actually support other women, phenomenal. That's really how we drive that forward and through. It's about creating that ripple effect. However, just to capitulate on what Andrea was saying earlier about women who are really there for themselves and are not opening those doors for others, there's a special place in hell for them, as Madeline would say. So really we've got to look at how is the pathway even forged in the first place? Well, why don't we have a look at MBAs globally and locally? Do we have enough women on MBAs, which is quite often one of the most natural routes through to the C-suite? So we really need to look at that right down to even early education. It's one of the reasons why I actively participate in Smart STEMs. We need open and broad minds. We need to be creating opportunities where people can really explore and get under the hood of what their skill set is and how do they then apply that. We're very fortunate in Scotland to have Changing the Chemistry, which is a voluntary organisation dedicated to that inclusion and diversity on boards for all genders, for all walks of life, and I think that's absolutely crucial. And we need to be considering that it's not just about women, it's about representation as well. How do we get that? It's about that intersectionality, and we really need to always not just be looking for the easy win. We need to be looking about that, what really adds that flavour to create that economic and cultural impact.
Thank you. Abir?
Okay.
Thank you for the question. So let me say that having women in senior leadership position roles, particularly C-suite and boardroom, helps female employees across the company develop more favorable perception about their career inspiration. So, and also potential opportunities. So they know that it's possible and it's not an illusion. So they think that's possible by watching. And a personal example I want to mention I was not a CSUT 3 years ago or a boardroom member. I went to Ethiopia in Africa to make a sustainability assessment. It was a social audit in a very large textile company there, dominated by men in managerial position, in top management and middle management positions, and many females as employees, as workers, just. And when making interviews, I saw how much girls were inspired by me, because it was the first time for most of them, they saw a woman making an assessment, an audit, and dealing with the top manager and the director. It was something surprising for them. So women who work in company led by women knows that they can achieve that goals, and they know they can do it in the future. I have another example. I'm now offering some training course to a group of students. When I met the student, she was a brilliant girl, a brilliant student in Durham University. She told me, "Oh, it's the dream of my life to be a leader of a company for consulting. So you inspire me a lot. And when I see you how you're working, I really want to do like you." So it's just showing a good example, and I'm so proud to be to inspire one or many girls and women, because they will feel empowered and they will feel inspired, and we have a great role here to push them and to encourage them to go ahead. Thank you.
Abir. Pavitra?
Thank you, Carla. Well, the panelists made some really good points. I think I can add a little bit more to that. Speaking of gender diversity and the leadership and boardroom level, I agree it has definitely improved over the last couple of years, and this is true in the Indian context as well. As Ipshita mentioned, even with a mandated act for the presence of at least one female board member, India still needs to catch up. Well, companies in India have less than 20% women representation on the boards, and this can again be linked back to hiring. Usually, other countries start with about the same percentage of men and women hired at the entry level. But as they move along the professional ladder, more men reach higher rungs faster than women do. Now, think of the scenario in the Indian context. We start with more men at the entry level than women. When such is the case, how can we expect more women in the leadership roles? Well, to add to that, here is the grim news. The World Economic Forum says that gender parity will not be attained for another 100 years. Now, I see this conclusion as we are taking baby steps towards the goal while we should be sprinting. Bringing my focus to another point here, as a mid-career professional, I'd like to take a different angle at this approach. Well, undoubtedly, equal representation of women in the leadership positions have a positive trickle-down effect, as Abir mentioned. But I'd like to focus on what women can do throughout the company. As Andrea mentioned, can we support other women colleagues instead of competing with them? Can we speak out and find ways to voice our opinion for improved gender representation in the company? I talked a bit about inclusivity, and so did Ipshita. For companies, ensuring inclusivity also means creating an environment that would enable the employees to voice frank opinions and share authentic stories. All in all, it's not just about top-down effect, but also about bottom-up decisions and actions that can accelerate women's equality. Thank you.
Ginger?
Well, intelligence, being the best version of yourself, hard work, those need to be the societal messages we send to the next generation. And having women in C-suite sends that message. It helps bring that messaging to reality, along with bringing a freshness to a stale environment of the boardroom. It challenges the outlooks and thoughts, stimulates modernization and progress. I mean, it takes a village to move forward in life and in the workplace. Leaders set the pace for that. They set the pace for workplace perceptions of when and what equality means. Women have helped shape the stage and face of corporations all over the world for decades. By addressing equality at the top level, it sends a message to a culture and a society that are promoted based on merit and inclusion, and a variety of backgrounds is what's valued. Helping human beings fulfill their hopes and dreams and ambitions are how companies grow, how they help fulfill that company's missions and visions and impact for the betterment of people. Every woman has immense life value and gives a company power, perspective, and that companies wouldn't otherwise have. Women in leadership roles give our next generation youth a positive role model to look up to, that with action, that their dreams can be achieved and realized. For young women who are transitioning to adulthood who have poor family backgrounds need opportunities to be mentored by these C-suites and boardroom members. It shows young women the endless possibilities that mentoring strong women isn't a poor thing. Standing up, being remarkable, standing out, encourages other women to shine through intelligence, is more valued and respected over the scantily or barely clad pop stars and rappers who sexualize women on music videos and in social media. Intelligence and hard work need to be the norms of adult life, and that's the messaging we need to send to our next generation youth.
Thank you, panelists. We do have a question, again from Andrea, who asks, who wants to be the mandatory woman on a board? Does the panel have any ideas about how to demonstrate your value without being viewed as overly self-promoting, trying to prove your worth as the mandatory woman?
I would say that being confident is not a negative thing. And women need to have confidence in themselves to stand up and be bold, stand out and be remarkable. That's not a negative thing to do. And we get perceived sometimes as just being arrogant and egotistical when we're just being confident. I think that distinction needs to be made to all women.
I think the issue here is also that a lot of stereotypes are linked to women because of age-old perspectives. Say, for example, most people think women are the ones who need more flexibility in work-life balance because of family obligations. That's not true. Everyone wants that. It's not just, don't just link it to women. And because of this, many people see it as women are not capable of committing themselves completely to the job and to the leadership positions. So again, these are the attitudes that we need to break as a society through cultural transformation, as I was speaking. And this cannot happen overnight. And this cannot happen by only a small group of people. This has to take place at a larger scale. And it is taking place by constantly speaking. Women are speaking out. There are messages going out through every sort of media, and there is a trend towards cultural transformation, but we are only taking baby steps towards it. And also the other point is that women are expected to be way more qualified, very well performing than men to be able to get that leadership position, as Carla mentioned. And how do we break this? I don't know. I haven't done that yet. Maybe panelists with more experience can add better value to this discussion.
Deepshita?
I think, take every opportunity as it comes to you, grab it. It doesn't matter if a few fingers are pointed, if people think you're too brash, you're doing too much, you're doing too little, because eventually performance will speak for you. And I think that's all that matters to companies finally. At the end, they're there to serve their customers, they're there to serve their stakeholders, turn over a profit. If you can do that, then you're well on your way. So I think that's what I would say.
Christina?
I think we need to be also understanding of, broad brush versus direct experience. And I think certainly something Pravitha said about cultural transformation. If you're a woman going into a board that has been predominantly male and are now just starting to introduce this, sometimes it can take quite a number of women to get through to actually make that shift happen. And what we need to be considerate about is it might very well be a very capable and viable woman who was there on that board but wasn't able to make that change. And we need to make sure that women aren't feeling oppressed or downtrodden because they've not been able to make that happen there. We need to keep encouraging them to look forward and look at where they might be able to make that shift and change happen. For me personally, I sit on the board of a climate action plastics transformation company, which we are there, and we've actually shared some of our governance board with them also because it's about affecting that change. But me personally, I don't want to be leading my company. My role is in the architecture and the building and the joining of the solutions. I want someone to be leading at that top level for me. I don't want to be getting inundated by the day-to-day. For me, I'm a pragmatist. I'm practical in what I do. I want to be down there. I'm a grassroots person. I'm very much from the bottom up. That's how I affect change. And I need that opportunity to be able to do that in the best way that I can. And for me, that's by putting someone in at the chief exec level for me.
Thank you, Christina. Ubir?
So for me, women can prove their performance by working and by being first self-confident. I share the same point of view as Christina, to be self-confident and stop to just prove that she can have the same rights as men employees, and she must prove it. That means I can mention an example in some companies or countries, maybe they're giving today paternity leave like maternity leave, because if I'm a woman, I'm applying for a job. If the leader tell me, okay, so you will not be as much as available as a male employee. So because of availability, because of maternity leave. So now we are talking about gender equality. Now fathers can have in some countries paternity leave like women, like mothers. So there is no difference between both. It's I think it's a great example to show how women don't have some inconvenient things to stop them and to avoid leaders to see how much empowered they are and how much competitors they are and how much performance they are. And just by proving their success and their targets, and by working on their KPIs, we need to stop thinking, oh, it's female employees or male employees who will be better for the post. The better will get the opportunity or the job or something else by the merit and not by the gender.
Thank you, Abir. Excellent. So now to our third and last topic. What can businesses do to address discrimination, violence, and other unfair practices? Ginger, would you please start?
I think they need to listen, call out the injustices, get involved, stand up, speak out loudly and boldly against any discrimination, violence, or unfair practice. And again, businesses are made up of humans in a workplace, and we spend more than 50% of our lives in interacting in a human workplace. Far too many of us just turn a blind eye. We don't want one more thing on our plate, or because we fear connecting with the pain of another human being. It's gone on has gone so long that we've become numb to things like modern day slavery, turn away from the youth sitting on the side of the road, or just not even pay attention to the kids that are in foster care. Sometimes they're even blamed and mistreated, thinking that they created the problems themselves. Young adults need to have inspiration and showing the right way. Businesses and workplaces need to stand up and get involved and just say no. No as humans, no as companies, and stop looking away from basic human rights of another human being. We need to balance our lives with compassion for others, with diligence and teaching and learning from each other, from our cultural differences, our genders, our age, our backgrounds. Each of those have divine and supreme diverse contributions that can be made to inspire others. And that's what we need to be doing, using those tools as an educational playground to change the next generation.
Thank you, Ginger. Pavitra?
Thank you, Carla. To me, I think this is such a convoluted challenge because of its interlinkage with other wicked problems in the society. Well, when we talk about discrimination, violence, and other unfair practices, business need to address this internally along its value chain as well as externally across the society in which it operates. I'd like to address this aspect from the CSR perspective. Well, by now, you all know that I like speaking about the Indian scenario. Now, the government has mandated CSR investment for the top 1,000 companies as per the Companies Act of 2013. Although it does not necessarily require the companies to follow the UN SDG framework, the most relevant SDG targets are mapped under government's own initiative, categorized into 13 sectors. Well, critics have pointed out several shortcomings with this approach. What I find most disheartening is that gender equality, although gets included, there is no explicit reference to businesses' commitment towards violence and discrimination against women. As a result, majority of the companies do not invest in this long, prevalent, and timely issue. Now, here are some interesting data from the National CSR portal. In the financial year 2018 and 19, out of approximately 25,000 companies listed on the portal, just 127 companies invested in initiatives oriented towards gender equality, which accounts to about 0.5%. And the total spending amounted to 51 crore rupees, which is less than 0.3% of the total yearly CSR expenditure. Now, India ranks 112 out of 153 countries in Gender Gap Index. And it's no news that it often ranks number one in the world's most dangerous countries for women. Period. Businesses operational in the country do not need further data than that to get serious. Betterment towards this cause cannot be achieved without companies prioritizing these issues in their CSR agenda, regardless of what the legislature mandates. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That's very thoughtful, Pavitra. Abir?
So thank you. First, we need to keep an open mind because here we are talking about discrimination, harassment, etc. So many employees have a hard time believing that discrimination and harassment could be happening right under their nose. And second, we treat the complainer with respect and compassion. We need to do that. Employees often find it extremely difficult and hard to complain about this kind of treatment. So it's not obvious for them to talk about it or to consider that it's something like illegal or not allowed by companies or by the law. And third, we shouldn't shoot the messenger. So leaders, according to me, what I do as well, should be explicit about this topic, about interactions, about how to plan to support employees, and they should be open to conversation with their employees and need to feel safe. That means each employee needs to feel safe in the company and how to speak and how to share their concerns. Some companies, I saw a lot of companies when I was making audits, they have a box for suggestions or for claiming, and it's anonymous. Also, people who are afraid of expressing or talking about their concerns, they can put a letter to the director and speak and talk about their concerns. So they should provide action items like trainings, for example, or implementing safe spaces for open discussion and more relaxed times of policies, and hear leaders and
Abir I think Abir may be having technical difficulties. Christina, would you like to speak?
Yeah, Ginger nailed it, and then everyone subsequently straight after that absolutely call it out. But in order to call it out, we need to actually make sure people feel empowered to be able to speak out, because quite often moral courage can be squashed down, and we need to make sure that that isn't the case. And that's where where culture is absolutely crucial and key, and where it can be much more challenging to try and shift that in larger organisations. And it's one of the reasons why we set up in business was to actually create that underpinning culture first and foremost, because you need to be able to have that open dialogue. People need to be able to feel comfortable. And even although we operate quite a flatline structure, I'm still deferred to as the boss because I am legally the managing director. But we have a very much an inclusive team approach, and it's about followership, not just leadership. It's about how does followership fit into that, and how do you create those safe spaces like Pavitra was talking about earlier as well. We need to make sure that if you can't go direct to the management team, that you can go to someone and you are fully supported and listened to. And it needs to be. And that's actually used as a learning tool, and that itself then starts to lead on. It's not just dismissed or it's resolved. You actually use that and use that example to carry on for continuous improvement within the organisation. And that's how we learn. We learn by doing, and we learn by different things into mode, and we need to build on that and not see it as something terrible that's happened, but it's an enlightenment, and how do we use that to our advantage to make sure that that doesn't follow through, but that we have tools and techniques to support everyone.
Thank you very much, Christina. Ipshita?
So in India, in 2013, the government brought out this act, which is called the Prevention of Sexual Harassment at the Workplace. So there is mandated trainings, and if you are beyond a certain size, then you have to constitute a board. There have to be external people on the board, etc. All of that. So last year, Global Women in PR, the organization that I'm part of, we conducted a survey among women working in PR. So as most of you would know, that PR and communications have a lot of women. It's a women-dominated area, and so typically you would think that harassment would be lower. 7 years after the act is in place, 7 years since trainings have been going on in organizations, we were really a little taken aback to see that more than 50% of women who responded to the survey said that they had been faced with some sort of sexual harassment. And oftentimes it is a journalist, a senior journalist, or a client. And less than 10 or 11% have ever spoken up. So, you can have all the acts in place and all the laws in place, but till you demonstrate that you as a corporate entity, the leadership, if you are not demonstrating non-tolerance of this sort of behavior, of any sort of violence, any sort of harassment, sexual or otherwise at the workplace, we are not going to move forward as much as we should have in this time. So to wrap up and take what all the panelists are saying, that as much as speaking up is important, companies need to demonstrate that they are willing to not victimize somebody speaking up and take the necessary steps, even if that may be somebody in the C-suite that needs to be pulled up for behavior.
Thank you, Ipshita. We do have some time left, and Andrea Hoffmeyer has put in a point that although India now has law against harassment, it still occurs, mentions quality management standards. For instance, the automotive industry has a specific whistleblower clause. And I'd like the group to think about the connection. We earlier in our panel discussed the issues for cultural change starting in families. And I'd like to connect the families to this issue here. where we are changing it in the businesses. Then open it up for general discussion. Ginger, would you start? Or Pavi, you can start.
Yeah, I just have one point to that, Carla. I'm thinking of this in the scenario of, again, Indian context. So say if you are an entry-level person working in a huge company and you face sexual harassment, and the only people you can go back to and discuss this is your family. And what most Indian families say is that don't discuss this with anyone else. Just go do your job, come back, find another role, jump into that. Yes, well, because this is such a convoluted problem. Because if you are a professional who's just entered the company, who's just entered the workforce, starting on your career, and this happens to you, you cannot go around talking about this because once this gets documented, then probably there are high chances that no other company will give you the job. And how do we address this issue? Um, how do we address this? Because yeah, this would leave someone so handicapped.
Thank you, Pavitra. That is a dilemma, but it is not just a dilemma in India. Ginger, would you like to talk about it?
Yes, I'm taking it back to family dynamics. I mean, our culture, not just the United States, but all over the world, we've taught the youth through family abuse, through human trafficking, through child abuse. Don't talk about it. Don't talk about the pains of what we're going through. And it's not just women, it's men, boys. Kids are getting abused, and we're learning as a society we don't want to talk about it. And you start there as a young person, your family dynamics, and you have a society that maybe you've seen somebody else around your own areas that have abused a child, and we still don't talk about it. That leads to hurt on your heart that you take into the workplace. So when we do see injustices in the workplace, we still don't talk about it. And we have to stop this cycle of silence and accept that it's okay to talk about the pains of another human being, and it's okay to hurt along with them. And then take that into the workplace. You need to continue to speak out and change policies and demonstrate an unwillingness to accept the injustices.
Christina?
Yeah, absolutely. Just to follow on from all of that, I think part of it also comes down to, do we have, and if we have them in the family, fantastic. If we don't have them in the family, we need to make sure that we have safe spaces so that we can explore how we're feeling, how we are going to tackle that. Because before we even speak out, it's how do we explore that around our own humanity, around our own values and beliefs, and be proactive around not just speaking out, but how can we, once we've spoken out, start to put parameters in place that prevent that from continuation. And so I think that now that we're starting to live in a more digital world, I think that there's certainly more opportunity to do that. And I think as we see this generation on generation, we're seeing that shift and change happening. But I think also what we're also seeing is more human trafficking being more prevalent, where it was pretty much hidden a lot of the time before, right through to domestic and child abuse. And we need to really make sure that we have opportunities to speak about it within the family, within our social themes, within our business communities, and it's really just about finding them. I recently joined a space just in January there called Spaces for Listening. I even felt able to speak about some things that I was really challenged by, and that allowed me the energy to keep going and pushing through, knowing that what we are doing in our business is right, but that it can be very debilitating at times when you're being pushed down. And so we need to do that, and we need to find, I think, who was it that said it earlier about finding our allies? Carla, it was you.
That was me.
Yeah, it was. Carla, it was you. We need to find our allies, and that's one of the beautiful things about being part of this collective of women and men, is that we are using that strength in numbers to start affecting that social and environmental change. And we're all doing it in our own different ways, and it's very much an and approach, not an either or.
Thank you. I'm not sure if Abir, are you back? So, I think Ipshita, do you want to talk?
Yes, sure. So I think finally it's about changing culture, changing perceptions, changing what women should do, shouldn't do. These things definitely both at a family level and at a corporate level. And in corporate houses, I think the issue of speaking up, a lot of that can be addressed through mentoring and buddy systems and things like that, that give you the opportunity to have an ally, have somebody with you, have somebody who's been around, who's been there, done that, and can support you a little bit. So women supporting women, right? We talk about this all the time, and maybe not enough. It's the only way forward. I think, when we get past our differences and the sort of rivalry at the workplace, and come together on these sort of causes, on things that are going to make a better workplace, a better society for the women coming after us.
Excellent. Thank you, panelists, for your passion and your expertise on these topics. And thank you, audience, for your participation and comments. This concludes the SDGs 5 and 10 panel, but stay around for our next panel on SDG 8, decent work and economic growth. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you for
Carla.
having us.
That was really powerful session. Thank you so much for moderating it so well and managing the time perfectly. And thank you, Ginger, Pavitra, Abir, Christina, Ipshita, for being an inspiration for many and all of us too. Let's all think, can we be women who support other women? Can we stand up for other women when we see injustice, violence, harassment happening to them? This is really serious and we have a lot to think about and a lot to do. And with that thought, we are ending this session here, and we'll be back with another set of powerful women to talk on decent work and economic growth.